In a grand concert hall, the air buzzed with excitement. The chandeliers sparkled like stars above, casting soft golden light over a sea of well-dressed people. Everyone was there for one reason: to witness a performance by a world-famous pianist. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and perfume, and the low hum of conversation filled the space as people waited eagerly for the show to begin. Amidst this elegant crowd, a quiet figure slipped into an empty seat near the back. She wore simple clothes that didn't match the glitz and glamour around her. Her face held no makeup and her hair was tied back in a loose bun. No one paid much attention to her. She seemed out of place, almost invisible. People nearby exchanged quick glances, silently judging her plain appearance. They assumed she must have tagged along with someone or wandered in by mistake. Little did they know, this unassuming woman carried a story far richer than anyone could imagine. The lights dimmed slowly, signaling the start of the evening. A hush fell over the audience as the maestro walked onto the stage, his presence commanding respect. He bowed gracefully, his tailored suit catching the light just right. The applause was thunderous, echoing through the hall like rolling waves. As he took his seat at the piano, anticipation hung thick in the air. Every note mattered here. This wasn't just music, it was an experience. While everyone else leaned forward in their seats, eyes glued to the stage, the woman stayed still, her hands resting gently on her lap. She looked calm but distant, lost in thought. To the casual observer, she might have appeared bored or disinterested, but inside memories stirred, pulling her back to another time, a time when she too had dreams bigger than herself. Years ago, she had been a prodigy, a child whose fingers danced effortlessly across piano keys. Teachers marveled at her talent, saying she had something special, something rare. Music flowed through her veins like blood, and every melody felt like a piece of her soul spilling out into the world. Back then, life revolved around practice sessions, recitals, and endless praise. For a while, everything seemed perfect, but life has a way of changing without warning. One day, tragedy struck, shattering her world into pieces. Someone close to her, a guiding light in her life, was suddenly gone. The loss hit hard, leaving behind a void so deep that even music couldn't fill it. Slowly, she stopped playing altogether. The passion that once defined her vanished, replaced by silence. Over time, she drifted away from the world of concerts and stages, burying herself in ordinary routines. Yet tonight, something drew her back to this place. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it was curiosity. Whatever the reason, she found herself sitting among strangers watching the maestro perform. Each note he played resonated deeply within her, stirring emotions long buried beneath layers of pain and regret. She listened intently, her heart aching with a mix of admiration and longing. There was beauty in what he created, but also a reminder of all she had left behind. As the first half of the program came to an end, the maestro stood up and addressed the audience. With a warm smile, he announced a unique segment, an open invitation for anyone in the crowd to come up and play a piece on stage. It was meant to be a fun addition to the evening, a chance for amateurs to share their love for music. At first, there was only silence. People glanced at each other awkwardly, none willing to take the risk. Some laughed quietly, assuming the offer was purely symbolic. Then from the back of the room a hand went up hesitantly. All eyes turned toward the source, a quiet figure rising from her seat. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Who is she?" someone whispered. Another replied, "Probably doesn't know how talented these musicians are." Despite the skepticism, the woman made her way to the stage, her steps steady despite the weight of countless stares. When she reached the piano, the maestro greeted her politely, though surprise flickered briefly across his face. He gestured toward the bench, inviting her to sit. She adjusted the stool slightly, her movements deliberate yet unhurried. Then, placing her hands on the keys, she paused for a moment, closing her eyes as if gathering strength. The room grew, silent anticipation hanging heavy in the air. What happened next would leave an indelible mark on everyone present. The moment her fingers touched the keys, a transformation occurred, not just in her, but in the entire atmosphere of the hall. The first notes rang out, clear and pure, filling the space with an emotion so raw it took everyone's breath away. It wasn't flashy or overly complex. Instead, it was deeply human, telling a story only she could understand. Each chord carried fragments of joy, sorrow, hope, and resilience, weaving together a tapestry of sound that spoke directly to the soul. The audience sat frozen, captivated by what they were hearing. Gone were the dismissive glances and whispered judgments. Instead, there was awe, pure, unfiltered awe. Even the maestro, who had spent decades mastering his craft, stood motionless, his expression one of disbelief mixed with profound respect. He realized instantly that this simple woman possessed a gift beyond measure, one that transcended technical skill and delved straight into the heart of what music truly meant. For her part, the woman played as if the world had melted away. This wasn't about impressing anyone or proving a point. It was about reconnecting with a part of herself she thought she'd lost forever. With each note, she felt lighter, freer, as though years of pent-up emotion were finally finding release. By the time she reached the final chord, tears glistened in her eyes, though her face remained serene. When the last sound faded into silence, the hall erupted into applause, louder and more heartfelt than anything heard that night. The maestro stepped forward, visibly moved. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice trembling slightly. Turning to the audience, he added, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed something extraordinary." The crowd cheered again, this time standing in ovation. For the first time in years, the woman allowed herself to feel seen, not as someone overlooked or underestimated, but as someone whose art had touched hearts in ways words never could. This unexpected turn of events marked not just the climax of the evening, but the beginning of a new chapter for the woman. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was certain: she had reclaimed a piece of herself that night, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the woman sat quietly in her seat, her mind began to drift. The music from the stage faded into the background, replaced by memories that felt both distant and vivid. She wasn't thinking about the elegant crowd around her or the maestro playing with such precision. Instead, she was transported back to a time when her life revolved around something entirely different: her own connection to music. Years ago, she had been someone else entirely. Back then, she spent most of her days at a piano, her fingers dancing across the keys as if they had a life of their own. Her teachers often said she had a gift, one that couldn't be taught but only nurtured. They marveled at how easily melodies flowed from her, each note carrying an emotion so raw it seemed to speak directly to the listener's soul. It wasn't just skill, it was passion. Music wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. But life has a way of changing without warning. When she was younger, there was someone in her life who meant everything to her, a person who believed in her dreams even more than she did herself. This person was her anchor, her cheerleader, the one who encouraged her to keep going no matter how hard things got. With their support, she climbed higher and higher, performing in small recitals and earning praise wherever she went. For a while, it felt like nothing could stop her. Then came the day that changed everything. One moment, her world was full of promise and hope. The next, it crumbled beneath her feet. That guiding light in her life, the person who had stood by her through every triumph and struggle, was suddenly gone. Just like that. No goodbyes, no explanations, just emptiness where they once were. The pain was unbearable, a weight so heavy it crushed every ounce of joy out of her existence. At first, she tried to play through the grief. Sitting at the piano became her refuge, the one place where she could still feel close to the person she'd lost. But over time, even that comfort faded. The music that once brought her happiness now reminded her of all she'd lost. Every melody felt hollow, every chord incomplete. Slowly, she stopped playing altogether. First, it was skipping practice sessions. Then, it was canceling performances. Eventually, she walked away from music completely, shutting the door on a part of herself she thought she'd never see again. Life moved forward as it always does. She found ways to fill the void. Simple routines, quiet jobs, moments stolen here and there to keep herself busy. On the surface, she seemed fine. To the outside world, she was just another face in the crowd, living an ordinary life. But inside, she carried a deep ache, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. Music had been her voice, her identity, her purpose. Without it, she felt lost, like a puzzle missing its final piece. Yet, despite all this, something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the energy in the concert hall, the way the air buzzed with anticipation. Or maybe it was the sound of the maestro's fingers gliding across the keys, reminding her of a language she used to speak fluently. Whatever it was, it stirred something within her, pulling her back to memories she'd buried long ago. As she watched him perform, she couldn't help but admire his skill, his ability to convey so much emotion through his craft. At the same time, a pang of envy tugged at her heart. Not jealousy exactly, but a wistful yearning for the days when she too had shared that same bond with the piano. When the maestro announced the surprise segment, inviting members of the audience to come up and play, her stomach tightened. She knew she shouldn't even consider it. What would people think? How could she possibly measure up to someone of his caliber? Yet, as the silence stretched on and no one volunteered, a strange feeling bubbled up inside her. It started as a whisper, barely audible, but grew louder with each passing second. Before she realized what she was doing, her hand shot up, surprising even herself. The murmurs around her didn't go unnoticed. She heard the skeptical whispers, the faint laughter. Some assumed she was joking, others thought she might embarrass herself. But none of that mattered anymore. Something inside her had shifted. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of courage, a tiny flame flickering to life after being extinguished for so long. As she made her way to the stage, her heart pounded in her chest, but her steps remained steady. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about reconnecting with a part of herself she had abandoned. When she finally sat down at the piano, the world around her melted away. The skeptical stares, the polite applause, all of it faded into the background. All that remained was her and the instrument before her. Placing her hands on the keys, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to remember what it felt like to create something beautiful, something meaningful. And then, with a gentle touch, she began to play. Each note carried fragments of her journey, the highs and lows, the joys and sorrows, the love and loss. It wasn't perfect, not in the technical sense. There were hesitations, pauses where she stumbled slightly. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the emotion behind it, the raw honesty that poured out with every chord. She wasn't just playing a song. She was telling her story, sharing a piece of her soul with everyone in the room. And as the melody unfolded, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. By the time she reached the final note, tears blurred her vision, though her expression remained calm. She didn't need to look up to know that the atmosphere in the room had changed. The skepticism that greeted her earlier had transformed into awe, respect, and admiration. Even the maestro, standing off to the side, looked visibly moved, his eyes wide with wonder. In that moment, she realized something important. Her past didn't define her future. Yes, she had walked away from music, but it hadn't truly left her. It had simply been waiting patiently for her to find her way back. This realization filled her with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Tonight wasn't just about reclaiming a forgotten talent. It was about rediscovering who she was. And as the audience erupted into applause, she understood that her story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The maestro stood at the edge of the stage, his polished shoes gleaming under the soft spotlight. The audience had just finished applauding his latest performance, a masterful rendition of a classic piece that left everyone breathless. But instead of stepping back to take another bow, he paused, his eyes scanning the crowd thoughtfully. Then, with a warm smile, he made an announcement that caught everyone off guard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and inviting, "tonight is not just about me or my music. It's about all of us, our shared love for this art form. And so, I'd like to invite any of you who feel inspired to come up and share your own talent with us. Who knows? We might discover a hidden gem right here in this very hall." His words were met with polite laughter from the audience, but there was also a noticeable hesitation. People glanced at one another, some chuckling nervously, others shaking their heads as if to say, "No way, not me." After all, this was no ordinary gathering. It was a formal recital attended by people who appreciated fine music, not amateurs looking to test their skills on stage. Surely no one would actually take him up on his offer. But then something unexpected happened. From the back of the room, near the corner where shadows blended with light, a hand slowly rose into the air. At first, it seemed almost uncertain, as though the person raising it wasn't entirely sure they wanted to be seen. The movement drew murmurs of curiosity from those seated nearby. Heads turned, trying to locate the source of the gesture. When the figure finally stood up, whispers rippled through the crowd. It was her, the quiet woman who had slipped into the hall unnoticed earlier. Her plain clothes still marked her as different from the elegantly dressed attendees around her. As she began walking toward the stage, the murmuring grew louder. Some people exchanged amused glances, clearly thinking she must have misunderstood the invitation. Others leaned closer to their companions, speculating quietly about what might happen next. "She looks like she doesn't belong here," one man whispered to his wife, his tone laced with skepticism. "Maybe she thinks this is karaoke night," another joked, earning a few stifled giggles from those within earshot. Despite the growing chatter, the woman kept moving forward. Her steps were slow but steady, each one carrying her closer to the stage. She didn't look at the audience. Her focus remained fixed ahead, as if she were determined to block out everything except the path before her. There was something resolute in her demeanor, a quiet strength that hinted at more than met the eye. When she reached the base of the stage, the maestro greeted her with a polite nod. His expression betrayed a flicker of surprise. He hadn't expected anyone to respond, let alone someone who appeared so unassuming. Still, he gestured for her to climb the steps and take her place at the piano. The audience watched intently, their earlier amusement giving way to curiosity. What could this woman possibly have to offer? She settled onto the bench, adjusting it slightly to fit her posture. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment, trembling ever so slightly. For a brief second, doubt seemed to creep into her features. Was she having second thoughts? Had the weight of the situation finally hit her? But then, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the ivory keys. The room fell silent. Even the faint rustle of fabric or the occasional cough ceased entirely. All eyes were on her now, waiting to see what would happen next. The tension in the air was palpable, a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Would she stumble? Would she play something simple? Perhaps a nursery rhyme or a hymn? No one knew what to expect. Then she began. The first note rang out, clear and resonant, cutting through the silence like a blade slicing through fog. It was followed by another and then another until a melody emerged, soft at first, almost hesitant, but gradually gaining confidence. The music flowed effortlessly from her fingertips, weaving together notes that seemed to tell a story. Each chord carried a depth of emotion that couldn't be faked, a rawness that struck a chord deep within the hearts of those listening. The audience sat frozen, their initial skepticism melting away with every passing second. Gone were the smirks and raised eyebrows. Instead, there was awe, pure, unfiltered awe. Even the maestro, standing off to the side, looked stunned. His arms, which had been crossed casually over his chest, dropped to his sides. He tilted his head slightly, as if straining to catch every nuance of the performance unfolding before him. What made this moment even more remarkable was how personal the music felt. It wasn't flashy or overly technical, it was honest. Every note seemed to carry fragments of the woman's life, her joys, her sorrows, her struggles, and her triumphs. It was as if she were opening a window into her soul, allowing everyone in the room to glimpse the world through her eyes. The melody swelled and dipped, ebbing and flowing like waves crashing against a shore. It was hauntingly beautiful, leaving listeners breathless. For the woman, this was more than just a performance. This was a release, a chance to reconnect with a part of herself she had buried long ago. With each keystroke, she felt lighter, freer, as though years of pent-up emotions were finally finding an outlet. Tears welled up in her eyes, though her face remained calm, almost serene. She wasn't playing for applause or recognition. She was playing because she needed to, because the music demanded to be heard. By the time she reached the final chord, the entire hall was holding its collective breath. The last note lingered in the air, hanging there for a moment before fading into silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, as if breaking free from a trance, the audience erupted into applause. Loud, thunderous, and filled with genuine admiration, people clapped fervently, some even rising to their feet in a standing ovation. The maestro stepped forward, visibly moved. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice tinged with emotion. Turning to the audience, he added, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just witnessed something truly extraordinary tonight." As the applause continued, the woman sat motionless for a moment, her hands resting gently on her lap. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as someone overlooked or underestimated, but as someone whose art had touched hearts in ways words never could. This unexpected turn of events marked a pivotal moment not just for the evening but for the woman herself. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was certain: she had reclaimed a piece of herself that night, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the final note of her performance lingered in the air, the room seemed to hold its breath. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged with emotion, as if everyone present needed a moment to process what they had just experienced. For a few seconds, time stood still. Then, like a dam breaking, the audience erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite clapping reserved for formalities. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and full of admiration. People rose to their feet, clapping vigorously, some even whistling or cheering. The woman at the piano sat motionless, her hands resting lightly on her lap. Her face remained calm, but tears glistened in her eyes. She hadn't expected this reaction, not from a crowd that had initially dismissed her as out of place. Yet here she was, surrounded by people who now looked at her not with judgment but with awe. This moment felt surreal, almost dreamlike. A part of her wondered if she'd wake up any second, back in the quiet solitude of her ordinary life. Standing off to the side, the maestro watched her intently. His expression was one of deep respect mixed with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or wonder. He had spent decades mastering his craft, earning accolades and building a reputation as one of the finest pianists of his generation. Yet in this unassuming woman he saw something rare, an authenticity that transcended technique. It wasn't just skill that moved people. It was heart, and hers overflowed with it. When the applause finally began to subside, the maestro stepped forward. With a warm smile, he addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "tonight, we've been given a gift, a reminder of why music exists in the first place." He turned toward the woman, gesturing for her to stand. Reluctantly she did, her movements slow and deliberate. As she faced the crowd, another wave of applause washed over her, louder than before. For the first time since walking onto the stage, she allowed herself to truly take in the scene around her. Rows upon rows of people were on their feet, smiling, applauding, showing appreciation in ways she never imagined possible. There were no more skeptical glances, no whispers of doubt. Instead, there was genuine warmth, an acknowledgement of the beauty she had shared with them. It was overwhelming, humbling, and deeply healing all at once. Once the ovation died down, the maestro invited her to share her story. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she could put such private emotions into words. But then, encouraged by the kindness in his eyes and the supportive energy of the audience, she began to speak. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, but every word carried weight. "I haven't played in years," she admitted, pausing briefly to gather her thoughts. "Music used to be my entire world. I lived for it, for the joy it brought me, for the way it connected me to others, but life has a way of changing things." She glanced down at her hands, which had created magic moments earlier, but now rested quietly in her lap. "I lost someone very close to me, a person who believed in me more than anyone else. After that, playing became too painful. Every note reminded me of what I'd lost." Her words resonated deeply with many in the audience. They nodded knowingly, some wiping away tears of their own. Loss was universal, something everyone could relate to in one form or another. But so was resilience, the ability to rise after falling, to find light even in the darkest places. "But tonight," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "something pulled me back here. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was fate. Whatever it was, sitting here listening to your music," she gestured toward the maestro, "made me realize how much I missed this part of myself. So when you asked if anyone wanted to play, I thought, why not? Why not try again?" Her honesty struck a chord with everyone present. In a world where perfection often seemed mandatory, especially in spaces like this concert hall, her vulnerability was refreshing. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply wanted to reconnect with a piece of her past. And in doing so, she reminded everyone of the true purpose of music: to express, to heal, to bring people together. After sharing her story, the maestro took a step closer to her, his demeanor thoughtful. "Thank you for trusting us with your music and your journey," he said sincerely. Then turning back to the audience, he added, "This is what makes performances like these so special. Music isn't just about notes on a page or technical mastery. It's about connecting with others, telling stories, and creating moments that stay with us forever." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "And because of that, I'd like to extend an invitation to you." He pointed directly at the woman, whose eyes widened in surprise. "Would you consider performing alongside me in future concerts? Your talent deserves to be heard by more people, and I believe our collaboration could inspire countless others." The audience gasped audibly, followed by murmurs of excitement. Such an offer was unprecedented, especially coming from someone of his stature. For the woman, it felt like a dream unfolding right in front of her. She struggled to find the right words, her mind racing with disbelief and gratitude. Finally, she managed a simple yes, her voice trembling with emotion. The maestro smiled warmly, clearly pleased with her response. "Wonderful," he said, extending his hand to shake hers. "We'll talk details later, but for now, let's enjoy the rest of the evening." He bowed slightly, signaling the conclusion of this extraordinary interlude, and returned to his seat at the piano. As the recital resumed, the atmosphere in the hall had shifted entirely. The initial stiffness and formality were gone, replaced by a sense of connection and shared humanity. Even the most seasoned attendees, who might typically adhere strictly to the etiquette of when to clap during classical pieces too, found themselves moved beyond protocol. They weren't just spectators anymore, they were participants in something greater than themselves. For the woman, the remainder of the evening passed in a blur. She accepted congratulations from strangers who approached her during breaks, each expressing how profoundly her performance had touched them. Some shared personal stories of loss and healing, finding solace in her courage. Others simply thanked her for reminding them of the power of art to transcend barriers and unite people. Buys. The end of the night, she left the concert hall feeling lighter, as though a weight she'd carried for years had finally lifted. Walking home under the starlit sky, she reflected on everything that had transpired. What had started as a quiet decision to attend a recital had turned into a transformative experience, one that reignited her passion for music and restored her faith in its ability to heal and inspire. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and countless moments of growth. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the present, grateful for the chance to rediscover a part of herself she thought she'd lost forever. In the days that followed the recital, life for the woman began to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. The performance that had started as a quiet moment of personal courage quickly grew into something much larger. News of her unexpected appearance at the concert spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers from attendees and snippets shared on social media. People who hadn't even been there wanted to know more about the mystery pianist, whose music had left such a lasting impression. At first, she tried to brush it off. She didn't seek attention, nor did she feel comfortable being in the spotlight. But when interview requests started pouring in, from local newspapers, radio shows, and even national television, she realized she couldn't ignore the growing interest. Her story resonated with so many people because it was universal. A tale of loss, rediscovery, and finding one's way back to what truly mattered. For every person who reached out to her, it seemed, there was a parallel in their own lives. A dream abandoned, a passion set aside, or a chapter closed too soon. The maestro played a significant role in this newfound recognition. True to his word, he wasted no time in arranging meetings to discuss future collaborations. Their first conversation took place over coffee at a small cafe near the concert hall. Sitting across from him, she felt both nervous and grateful. He spoke passionately about how her music had reminded him why he fell in love with piano in the first place. "It's raw," he said, leaning forward earnestly. "Your playing isn't just technical, it's emotional. That's rare these days." He went on to outline his vision, a series of joint performances where they could blend their styles, creating something unique and meaningful. While he brought decades of expertise and polish, she offered authenticity and vulnerability. Together, they could craft an experience that wasn't just entertaining but deeply moving. As he talked, she found herself nodding along, her initial hesitation giving way to excitement. This wasn't just about performing anymore. It was about sharing her journey with others, inspiring them to reconnect with their own passions. But stepping back into the world of music after years away wasn't easy. Doubts crept in, especially during long hours of practice. Could she really live up to the expectations now placed upon her? Would audiences still respond to her the same way if she performed again? There were moments when fear threatened to overwhelm her, making her question whether she was ready for this kind of exposure. Yet each time doubt surfaced, she reminded herself of that night at the recital, the way the music had flowed through her, unfiltered and honest. If she stayed true to herself, everything else would fall into place. Her first official performance alongside the maestro came sooner than expected. It was scheduled for a charity gala, an event attended by influential figures from various fields. The pressure was immense, not just because of the high-profile audience, but also because she knew this would be her chance to prove, to herself and others, that her return to music was more than a fleeting moment of inspiration. On the evening of the gala, she arrived early, allowing herself time to sit quietly backstage and collect her thoughts. The venue was grander than anything she'd ever experienced before, with crystal chandeliers casting shimmering light across velvet seats. A string quartet played softly in the background as guests mingled, sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries. Despite the opulence surrounding her, she kept her focus inward, reminding herself why she was here. Not to impress, but to connect. When it was finally time to take the stage, her heart raced. Walking out under the bright lights, she scanned the sea of faces watching her intently. Some looked curious, others skeptical. But then she caught sight of the maestro, standing beside her with a reassuring smile. His presence calmed her nerves, grounding her in the moment. As they settled onto their respective benches, one grand piano for each of them, the room fell silent, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. They began with a piece chosen specifically for its contrast. The maestro led the opening section, his playing precise and commanding, showcasing his mastery of technique. Then, seamlessly, the melody shifted to her hands. Where his notes had been structured and polished, hers were fluid and emotive, carrying the weight of her experiences. The transition between their styles was breathtaking, leaving the audience spellbound. By the time they reached the final crescendo, the entire room erupted into applause once again. Afterward, people swarmed them, eager to express their admiration. One man, a philanthropist known for his reserved demeanor, approached her with tears in his eyes. "Your music. It reminded me of my late wife," he confessed. "She loved the piano, and hearing you play tonight made me feel close to her, again." Others shared similar stories, revealing how her performance had stirred memories and emotions buried deep within them. In those moments, she understood the true impact of what she was doing. Music wasn't just sound, it was connection. And through it, she was helping others heal just as she had begun to heal herself. As weeks turned into months, her confidence grew. With each new performance, she became more comfortable embracing her role as both a musician and a storyteller. Audiences responded not just to her skill but to her sincerity. They saw in her someone who had faced adversity and come out stronger, someone who dared to reclaim a part of herself despite the odds. Her journey inspired countless listeners to reflect on their own lives, prompting them to pursue dreams they'd long neglected. Even outside of concerts, opportunities arose that she never imagined possible. Schools invited her to speak to students about perseverance and following one's passion. Community centers asked her to lead workshops, encouraging others to explore their creativity without fear of judgment. Through these interactions, she discovered a joy she hadn't felt in years, the joy of giving back, of using her gift to make a difference in the lives of others. Yet amidst all the accolades and attention, she remained grounded. Fame wasn't her goal, nor was it something she craved. What mattered most to her was staying true to the essence of her music, the raw emotion, the honesty, the humanity. Every note she played carried fragments of her story, a testament to the power of resilience and self-discovery. By the end of the year, she found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. From the quiet, overlooked woman sitting in the back of a concert hall to a celebrated figure inspiring thousands, her transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. But more importantly, she had reclaimed a vital part of herself, the part that thrived on creation, expression, and connection. Music had always been her voice, and now it spoke louder than ever before. Though her journey was far from over, one thing was certain: she had found her purpose again. And in doing so, she reminded everyone around her, including herself, that it's never too late to start anew. The months rolled by, and the woman's life transformed in ways she could never have predicted. What began as a single night of courage at the piano recital had blossomed into a journey of rediscovery, connection, and purpose. She wasn't the same person who had walked into that concert hall feeling invisible. Each performance, each interaction, and each note played brought her closer to understanding not just her music but herself. Her partnership with the Maestro became a cornerstone of this new chapter. Together, they crafted performances that were more than just concerts. They were experiences. Their collaboration struck a delicate balance. His technical brilliance provided structure, while her emotional depth added soul. Audiences weren't merely entertained. They were moved. People often lingered after shows, reluctant to leave, as if hoping to hold on to the lingering magic of what they'd witnessed. Some even approached her personally, sharing how her music had touched them in profound ways, how it reminded them of loved ones lost, dreams deferred, or moments of hope when all seemed bleak. One evening during a performance in a small coastal town, something extraordinary happened. After the final bow, an older woman approached her backstage, clutching a folded piece of paper in trembling hands. "I need you to have this," she said softly, pressing it into the pianist's palm before walking away. Curious, the woman unfolded the note later that night. It read, "Your music gave me the strength I needed today. Thank you for reminding me that beauty can still exist even in hard times." That simple message stayed with her long after the tour ended. It wasn't the first time someone had expressed gratitude, but there was something about its honesty that resonated deeply. For years she had played for herself, for the joy it brought, for the memories it stirred. But now she realized her music carried a ripple effect. Every note she played reached beyond the stage, touching lives in ways she might never fully understand. Despite the growing acclaim, she remained humble. Fame didn't sit easily on her shoulders, and she avoided the trappings of celebrity. Instead, she focused on using her platform to inspire others. Schools invited her to speak to students about perseverance and creativity. Community centers asked her to lead workshops where beginners could learn to play without fear of judgment. These interactions filled her with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known before, a joy that came not from applause but from helping others find their own voices. Her story also sparked conversations about the importance of second chances. In interviews and talks, she openly shared her struggles, the pain of losing someone dear, the years spent away from music, and the fear of stepping back into the spotlight. "Life doesn't always go the way we plan," she would say, her voice warm and steady. "But sometimes those detours lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Don't be afraid to start again, no matter how much time has passed." Her words resonated with people from all walks of life. A young man once approached her after a workshop, his eyes shining with determination. "I used to paint," he confessed, "but I stopped because I thought I wasn't good enough. Hearing your story made me realize I should try again." She smiled, encouraging him to pick up his brush and see where it took him. Months later, he sent her a photo of one of his paintings, a vibrant landscape bursting with color, and thanked her for reigniting his passion. As her schedule grew busier, she made sure to carve out quiet moments for herself. Music had taught her the value of balance, of finding peace amidst chaos. On days off, she returned to the simplicity of her roots, sitting alone at a piano, letting her fingers wander freely over the keys without worrying about perfection. Those private sessions reminded her why she fell in love with music in the first place. It wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about expression, about creating something honest and true. Eventually, she decided to record an album, a collection of pieces inspired by her journey. It wasn't flashy or overly produced. Instead, it was raw and intimate, capturing the essence of her story. When it released, it received widespread praise, not just for its technical artistry, but for its emotional depth. Critics called it a masterpiece of vulnerability and a testament to the healing power of music. But what mattered most to her were the messages she received from listeners, stories of how the album helped them navigate grief, rediscover hope, or reconnect with parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. One particularly poignant letter came from a teenager struggling with anxiety. "Your music feels like a safe space," they wrote. "When I listen to it, I feel less alone." Reading those words brought tears to her eyes. She remembered how lonely she had felt during her darkest days, how music had been her refuge. Knowing that her work could provide comfort to someone else filled her heart with gratitude. Years later, reflecting on everything that had transpired, she realized her journey wasn't just about reclaiming her identity as a musician. It was about learning to embrace imperfection, to let go of fear, and to trust in the transformative power of art. Music had given her so much, not just fame or success, but a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. On a crisp autumn evening, she found herself back in the same concert hall where it all began. This time, however, she wasn't sitting unnoticed in the shadows. She was headlining the event. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the grand hall. Looking out at the sea of faces, she felt a surge of emotion, gratitude, pride, and a deep sense of connection. She began to play, her fingers gliding effortlessly across the keys. The melody was familiar yet fresh, carrying fragments of her past alongside whispers of her future. With each note, she poured her heart into the music, knowing that this moment wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had been touched by her journey. By the time she finished, the audience was on their feet, cheering wildly. But as she bowed, she noticed something different this time. Among the applause there were smiles, genuine, heartfelt smiles, that told her she had done more than entertain. She had inspired. Walking off stage, she paused for a moment, taking it all in. The lights dimmed behind her, casting soft shadows across the empty seats. For the first time in years, she felt whole, not because she had achieved fame or recognition, but because she had found her way back to the thing that made her truly happy. Music had been her companion through loss, silence, and rediscovery. Now it was her bridge to others, a way to share her story and remind them that no matter how far they wandered, they could always find their way home. And so, the woman continued, to play, not for glory or applause, but because music was woven into the fabric of her being. It was her voice, her solace, her gift to the world. And as long as there were hearts willing to listen, she knew her melodies would carry on, touching lives and inspiring others to believe in the beauty of second chances.